A very pleasant evening to all of you. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the first episode of Doc Plexus Surgical Suit, our brand new program offering latest advancement and insights in the field of surgery. Today's session is based on mucormycosis and its surgical treatment. As we all know that surgery is the cornerstone treatment for mucormycosis, and today's guest speaker will be explaining us the procedure in length. Dr. Satish Jain, a surgeon par excellence, having performed over 150,000 ENT surgeries. He performs the full spectrum of ENT and head neck surgeries and is also renowned for endoscopically inventing microscopic skull base surgery in the country and has invented many new surgical procedures. A role model in his fraternity, he has an award instituted in his name by the name Dr. Satish Jain Gold Medal Award, which is given to the best surgical videos in the field of endoscopic sinus surgery. Dr. Jain is also very passionate about teaching and has trained over 500 surgeons till date. He is regularly invited as a chief operating surgeon and a trainer in various workshops across the globe. Dr. Satish also initiated the cochlear implant program in Rajasthan that has till date saved hundreds of children from deep debilitating growth and retardation by timely restoring their hearing ability. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Satish. I would now request you to please commence your session.
Known so far to work on COVID-19. In spite of that, so many treatments are going on, and without knowing the fact that that may have some adverse consequences on the patient later on. And that is what we are discussing, the sequelae of COVID-19 here today. And one of them is mucormycosis. So all these patients are high-risk patients, should be followed post-COVID treatment to the otolaryngologist on a periodical basis. The reason being, these patients, the best treatment for these patients are reserved when they are picked up in the early course in the nasal phase. When the mucor invades the nose is the earliest phase which can be treated easily without needing of too much of treatment, too much of surgical debridement, and too much of antifungal treatment. And how you can pick up? We have to make some sort of awareness to these patients. Any diabetic patient, post-COVID particularly, having complaint of excessive dryness in the nose, excessive crusting in the nose, any sort of, paresthesia, anesthesia on the nose, on the face, and the teeth or surrounding region, anywhere, slightest of these symptoms are pointing to the mucor inflammation, mucor infestation. And the otolaryngologist, if he is following with the endoscopy, the earliest sign to pick up the mucor is the excessive crusting in the nose. That should raise the suspicion of the mucor. We should have a low threshold in diagnosing the mucor in such situation on endoscopy. And once you have any slightest suspicion, the next investigation to order is a gadolinium enhanced MRI. That is the need of the time to diagnose this disease earliest in the course. A lot of people having this kind of finding or suspecting the mucormycosis order the CT scan. Believe me, CT scan has big zero role, no role in the diagnosis of mucormycosis at all. The reason why I'm saying is the treatment of mucormycosis involves debridement of the necrotic or devitalized tissue so that you make the situation permeable to the amphotericin or the medical treatment. Because this disease, the mucormycosis, preferentially invades the vessel. It blocks the vessel, blocks the blood supply, and that blood supply going to that particular region, area, the mucosa, bone, nerve, lymphatic tissue, whatever it is, gets necrosed. And a necrosed tissue without having any blood supply is not going to be treated by any amphotericin or anything. Nothing is going to work. So there comes the role of surgery. So before surgery, the workup is so important. The reason being, like Ashish has already mentioned, the goal of surgery, if you see carefully, the goal of surgery is the removal of the devitalized tissue so that you can improve the penetrance of amphotericin to the rest of the area. The second goal of the surgery is whatever involved tissue, whatever maximum you can remove safely. It doesn't mean the radical removal of an enhancing area. and obviously to establish the histopathology. So the goal in the treatment, the first goal and the important goal in the treatment is to ascertain the areas which need to be debrided. And how can you ascertain? One and only means the MRI. Let me tell you, MRI is life-saving to these patients because MRI, once you get a gadolinium enhanced MRI, the gadolinium will reach only to those areas where the blood supply is on. Those necrotic areas which is blocked by the mucor thrombus, those areas are the areas where the gadolinium is not going to reach. So how can you pick up easily what areas need to be debrided? Get a gadolinium enhanced MRI. Those areas not showing contrast enhancement or showing lack of contrast enhancement are the areas need to be debrided. As simple as that. And if you are able to do that, rest of the areas which are enhancing need not to be unnecessarily debrided. Those areas which are enhancing on gadolinium, where the gadolinium is reaching, that your amphotericin will also reach. Why to unnecessarily debride and give morbidity to the patient? That is the role of MRI, which cannot be served by a CT scan, as MRI gives a lot of soft tissue details, which I am going to share with you where the first case starts. So the goal in the workup is to have a complete idea that what need to be debrided. We are not supposed to unnecessarily debride every enhancing area because the gadolinium is reaching or amphotericin will also reach, and that has an important role in the treatment. Post-surgery, in a full dosage when you give amphotericin, actually this is a medical disease for which the treatment, the gold standard treatment is antifungal, that is amphotericin, the most potent one. Surgery is not the answer to this problem. The role of surgery is just to facilitate medical treatment by means of removing only devitalized area. Like we are dealing with the gangrene. Just simply we are dealing with the gangrene. The drug is not going to reach. That is the source of infection for the propagation of the infection. Because this infection is so dreaded, in no time it reaches eye. It can involve the eye by contiguous involvement. Without contiguous involvement, even it affects the eye, it can lead to blindness by means of fungal emboli and reaching to the central retinal artery. A lot of cases we have seen, we have so many patients admitted with the blindness with no contiguous fungus in the orbit. So, and further from the orbit through the orbital apex and by perineural and perivascular area, it can easily go to the brain. We have patients which has already given, this mucor has already given infarction. So the goal of the entire workup, to understand this disease, we have to understand this triad of mucor, this triad of COVID, corticosteroid and diabetes is responsible for this mucormycosis surge. And the goal of treatment, the first role is surgery to remove the devitalized tissue, and that is decided by the MRI. If after surgery or in surgery you are not able to remove the complete devitalized tissue, you are back to square. That load of fungus will remain inside the devitalized tissue and it will keep on propagating the fungal infection further very fast. Like Ashish earlier mentioned, you have to be very, very careful while executing your surgical process so that you completely remove the devitalized tissue and then amphotericin work like some magic. So if you see the literature, the mortality rate of mucor varies from 30 to 80%. And majority of those publications, if you see, they've never ever considered the MRI as a tool to diagnose what area need to be debrided. That's why the high mortality rates have been described. In our hands, in last 1 year, we have dealt with more than 300 cases now with mortality rate less than 1%. Believe me, the single reason behind that is the extensive debridement of the necrotic tissue. We have debrided so extensively the skull base bones, both maxilla, entire cribriform plate, entire frontal bone, entire cribriform plate, everything soft tissue hanging, the eyeballs, brain, everything hanging and reconstructed with the soft tissue. But the success was simply due to removal of the all non-enhancing areas according to or guided by the MRI. That is the key to the success of the surgery, to have a good MRI, to get a complete information about what need to be debrided, what need not to be debrided. Like for an example, this first patient. This patient is a 55-year-old lady, the diabetic, had COVID a month back had been given steroid, had ketoacidosis, developed ketoacidosis because many of these patients from day one were given steroids as a home treatment and on OPD basis, and they were given steroid without proper monitoring of the blood sugar. Most of the time without proper monitoring of the blood sugar, and that is the result how the immunity is targeted by the steroid. So she developed this disease and presented to us with facial swelling, pain, excessive nose block, crusting, and all those. This is the first case, the basic one, without involvement of the vision. The vision is still intact. Next, the cases coming up are all having vision loss. One of the case had extension to the cranial cavity, all those in the order. So now you see, this is a contrast MRI. Let me show you separately. This is a contrast MRI. What I want to show, see this, can you see these black areas? Compare with the opposite side. Ashish, can you see?
Yes, Satish, very well.
See
Yes,
the opposite turbinate.
yes.
Turbinate has a good blood supply, and see how it is enhancing with the gadolinium. Can you see? And now see on this side what is happening to this turbinate? Completely black. This is classical black turbinate sign because the turbinates are the earliest structure which are affected by the mucor. You put your endoscope in the nasal cavity, the first structure you will see in the lateral wall, the turbinate affected by the mucor, loss of blood supply turning jet black. And that is what you see on the gadolinium enhanced MRI. And see here, the entire turbinate has gone black. This non-enhancing tissue in the maxilla and the classical feature as compared to the routine sinusitis, what you can pick up on MRI. See, our all patients are diagnosed on the radiological basis, not histology. Histology we'll take now intraoperatively. There are certain characteristics by means of which you can pick up the mucor so easily. Number one, this black turbinate, the black area loss of contrast enhancement as compared to the opposite side. Number two, perisinus inflammation. See this inflammation extending beyond the sinus. That is classical, which is never something you will see in a routine chronic sinusitis where it is limited by the bony blocks all around. That is classical of this. And third is, it has a preferential, involvement of the certain areas. We have seen in last 1 year, the variety of situation. It has this we'll show today in the couple of cases. This mucor preferentially affects certain areas. It preferentially affects the maxilla, the upper alveolus particularly, behind the maxilla, the sphenoid bone, which is most commonly affected after that. And in the sphenoid, the most important area is the pterygoid process. This pterygoid process, floor of the sphenoid, and the greater wing of the sphenoid is one of the most commonly affected area by this COVID, leading to the osteomyelitis of this bone. And if during surgery, if you are not able to remove that dead bone, osteomyelitic bone, you are back to square. We'll show a couple of cases, revisions today. We have been operated and the patient is still experiencing complications. One of the patient was operated 2 days before and somewhere, and yesterday presented with a vision loss after that. And we got the MRI done and the huge non-enhancing area at the skull base, which was not addressed earlier, as the patient was operated on the basis of the CT scan, not MRI. So there are certain facts we need to understand to treat this problem properly, to improve our results, to understand the science, to understand the need of MRI, and then to address adequately by the surgical means, and then followed with the medical therapy. So before we move on to the first case, we can take question, discussion, or anything.
Satish, 2-3 points. I think you say when you do complete debridement, the need for amphotericin is for less number of days.
Yes, obviously.
Very important.
Yes, Rashi is a good question. See, I've seen patients being treated in the medical units with amphotericin for 1 month, 1.5 months. Not exactly. This is not needed. We have treated hundreds of mucor patients now with amphotericin for maximum 7 days. The reason being the adequate debridement of the devitalized tissue, adequate debridement of the enhancing areas, which can be safely debrided without adding on to the morbidity to reduce the bulk of the fungus, so the fungus, the antifungals can work better. We have been able to stop amphotericin in 5 to 7 days and then switch over to the step down therapy of posaconazole. That is how, and we always monitor it with our, parameters, inflammatory parameters like CRP and ESR to see the results, and then we stop the amphotericin. So, if you do an adequate debridement, the need of amphotericin is much reduced rather than unnecessarily giving the amphotericin for months together, which is not warranted. That is deadly.
Who make the disease. So we need to watch out for those cases. And we also need to understand the early eye signs to prevent any kind of infection. So what we have been doing is instead of doing exenteration or removal of the eyeball and contents for all the cases, we have been doing limited debridement or just trying to work on the focus areas where there is excess proliferation of the fungus, like the inferior orbit or the medial orbit. So we go ahead, do a limited orbitotomy, remove the fungus and remove the diseased bone. And we use an amphotericin gel inside in that region locally before we close the tissues. So this has helped us in improving many of the cases. In all the cases, we try to do a medial orbital wall decompression. Now, how this helps is this will relieve the pressure on the optic nerve. So because there is inflammation inside the orbit, what will happen is that the optic nerve will get compressed, and this will get relieved if you do a medial orbital decompression. So my video cannot be started, sir. I think you've blocked my video. So if you can start the video,
can you
sir.
please... Are you getting this picture and surgical picture?
Yes, I can get the picture. Yes, sir.
Dinesh, can you please start Dr. Murthy's video? Sir, a quick question to Dr. Ramesh Murthy. Sir, do you use local injection of amphotericin pre-debridement or post-debridement?
Sir, in my experience, about 69 or 70 cases of orbital mucormycosis, I tried initially, maybe 1.5 months ago, giving intraorbital amphotericin B on a daily basis to about 9 patients. Unfortunately, it has not worked at all in these cases.
Thank you.
And there was increase in the proptosis and chemosis and the disease over time. So somehow, as Dr. Satish mentioned, the immunity is so bad in these cases that this intraorbital amphotericin B does not seem to work.
Okay.
In these
sir,
cases.
one more question. As Dr.
Arvind, can I just ask Dr. Murthy a question?
Sure, sir. Please go ahead.
What happens is you have orbital involvement, ophthalmoplegia, but the eye vision is not gone. So the decision when to exenterate, when not to exenterate, can you give us a little guideline on that? Because that seems to be a big problem to take the decision. If the muscles are involved and the eye is immobile, but the vision is present. Because with the ophthalmoplegia, diplopia comes in, and very often you have to shield the eye. So there's a lot of confusion on when to and when not to exenterate. So any thoughts on that?
Sir, in my series of about 70 bad cases of rhino-orbital mucormycosis, I have done exenteration for 19 cases, which is like 25 to 30% of the cases. So most of the cases have ptosis, they have ophthalmoplegia. There is no loss of vision in most of these cases. So if that is the situation, then we don't want them to lose the organ. We go ahead with limited debridement and we try to save the globe if possible. And of course, medial orbital wall, we remove it completely.
No, if the eyeball is not moving at all, then the double vision is what is bothering them. So very often then you need to shield that eye. So it's not something that we are very clear about. So from your point of view, if there is vision but the eye is immobile, you would still save the eye.
Yes, if the vision is if the eye is immobile, I'll still try to save the eye. One of the things that you can do is to give them prismatic glasses if it helps them in any way for a particular distance, like for near or for distance. But many times, the trauma of losing the organ or the eye itself is so psychologically devastating for the patient that we have to think twice before we go ahead and remove the eye. Of course,
my problem is this patient has got severe diplopia. So if you keep that eye, he's not, because of the diplopia, he's uncomfortable. So what do you do in these cases?
So in such cases, I would not remove the eye. I would rather give them some kind of occlusion on their spectacles. That is a very good option for them to continue with their daily activities. So if your central vision is blocked and if they have their peripheral vision, then they can do all their activities reasonably well because the other eye field of vision is good enough to help them do the work. Of course, they will have loss of depth perception, loss of stereopsis, but then they will get adjusted to that over time. So I give them occluded glasses for the time being. We have other options also like occlusive contact lens, but again, that is difficult to manage. I would not remove the eye in these cases, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Are you getting the picture, sir?
Yes,
Endoscopic picture? Hello?
Yes, sir. We are able to see
Yeah,
the-
Dr.
Yeah,
Satish.
Satish, we have the endoscopic picture. We saw you cauterizing those slight bleeding areas on the
Oh,
septum.
great.
Yes. Okay, we've got
So
you.
now, what we see here, we saw the MRI. We saw the turbinate necrosis on this side. Can you see this black turbinate?
Yes.
This is the middle turbinate, which is most commonly affected. See the black turbinate. Now, the surgical strategy, like we have several times mentioned, this radical debridement means you need to remove all those necrotic areas under vision. You are not supposed to leave even a square millimeter of the centimeter of the necrotic area for the disease to propagate further. And number two, to keep an eye post-op for any need of further debridement. So you need to have your cavity under vision so that you can monitor post-op as well. And third is to apply topical amphotericin or anything, but that is all possible only when you can monitor the cavity. You have a cavity in front of you. And the biggest obstacle is the medial wall of the maxilla. Here the indication for removal of the medial wall of the maxilla is different. It is not for any tumor removal like we do Denkers for many other regions. Here the role of this excess is to remove the entire necrotic bones, osteomyelitic bone, necrotic tissue under vision so we don't leave anything behind. And number two, to keep surveillance. किसकी आवाज आ रही है?
ऍसिडिटी की असं काय झालं नाही ना
Keep an eye, surveillance post-operatively so that you can tackle the situation further in case need arises. Okay?
Yeah, so Satish, the first question that comes is related to this.
Yes.
Do you remove only the affected area or would you remove the surrounding areas to have better access for post-op? For example, if you have a sphenoid involvement but the Onodi cell is not involved, would you clear the ethmoids to give better access? That means, are you going to open up unaffected areas? That is the question now. Yeah.
Yes. In case is coming in the way to, impede my post-operative surveillance, it is better to remove. And that is what I have started here. See, I am removing this medial wall. It is not affected by the mucor, but the tissue behind is affected by the mucor. And if I don't remove this, I can't see that tissue, that area head on. I can't see that area head on, I cannot ensure an adequate clearance and an adequate surveillance post-operatively. And see what I am doing with my this cobblator. I am removing the medial wall of the maxilla.
Yeah, so that was a question from Dr. Ponkia. So I hope Dr. Ponkia, your question is answered.
See, the access is important not only for the surgical clearance, but for the post-operative surveillance as well. As if you have a good surveillance, you don't need to repeat your radiological investigation again and again. And that is the key.
Yeah, so the next question is, after your debridement, when do you do imaging again to see if something is left behind? That's the next question.
That's a very important question. After the debridement, if some symptoms persist, if your inflammatory markers do not come down in spite of the proper amphotericin B treatment, like my CRP is still rising, my ESR is still rising, that means I have missed somewhere the disease, which I need to look back, and for that we need a radiology then. If you are not able to see endoscopically, you need a radiology then.
You would not do it as a routine after debridement.
No. See, our monitoring post-operatively, picture of the inflammation going on. And it's a very cost-effective. You can get it done every day. It doesn't cost more than 20 rupees anywhere. And it gives a very good idea, the true picture of the inflammation going on, the state of the inflammation.
Okay, and Dr. Apuro wants to know, in the post-operative period, you said for about 7 days you give amphotericin. How do you determine the dosage? बोल देना किसी को सिर्फ. Yeah.
Sir, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, Dr. Apurva wants to know your dosage schedule in the post-operative amphotericin that you give.
Yeah, my schedule for the amphotericin is roughly 5 to 7 days. And until then, the regular monitoring of the cavity to see all vital tissues under vision, to irrigate the cavity with the solution, and to keep an eye with the CRP and ESR both. And if everything is going good, we can switch over to the, posaconazole as a step down therapy after 5 to 7 days.
And how long will that be given?
Yeah, that is again monitored by the same endoscopic picture, by the CRP and ESR and the symptomatology, clinical scenario of the patient, but roughly 2 to 3 months minimum
Okay.
until the CRP and the ESR comes back to normal.
Dr. Satish, and how much roughly is the total amphotericin dose you generally give in these 7 days?
So my doses are different according to the picture. Like for this particular patient, my dose will be say 5 milligram per kg per day. For the extensive skull base involvement, intracranial involvement, the doses will be escalated up to 10 milligram, 8 to 10 milligram per day. For a better penetration to tackle the disease burden better. Debrider. See, this is the medial wall of the maxilla.
And what about
See,
the
once
posaconazole
this is my
dose?
obstacle. This is my obstacle to look at the area affected. The moment once I remove this wall, everything will be head on. Without removing this, we cannot work effectively to the area which is affected by the disease.
Okay, Satish, Dr. Adrian wants to know that when you see a patient of Mucor, how soon should you go ahead with the debridement? When do you decide to do the debridement?
Earlier, sir. Once we establish the diagnosis radiologically, clinically, it should be done as early as possible because some of the, complications, they happen to appear all of a sudden like vision loss. It is not the contiguous involvement leads to the vision loss always. It is the thromboembolic events leading to the vision loss more often. So it should not be, I would say it should be done as early as possible the
So you
moment the patient is
You
diagnosed.
would treat it as an emergency.
Yeah, emergency means in our center, like patient we are getting, it takes almost a day, 24 hours for the workup, so many things. These patients requires a thorough medical workup, anesthesia workup, and many of these patients have a lot of comorbidities. Their kidney condition, their glycemic control, the cardiac condition, so many things need to be thoroughly assessed for the anesthesia point of view and all. So it takes almost 24 hours by and large for us to bring the patient to the theater. In
Satish,
general.
Dr. Indu wants to know in all these 100 cases that you've had, have you had patients without diabetes post-COVID, without diabetes who had Mucor?
How many patients?
Have you had patients without diabetes who develop Mucor?
Yes, yes. The patient had a transient diabetes.
Okay.
Section no.
Sir, we have got Dr. Ayesha Sunawala also joining in.
Yeah.
She is a consultant infectious disease expert at Hinduja Hospital. We can direct few of our queries regarding the antifungal medications to her as well.
Welcome, Ayesha. Thank you very much for joining.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Now, while Satish is proceeding with the surgery, few questions to you. There have been question from Dr. Ravi. Any prophylaxis drug that you can use to prevent Mucor from happening?
Yeah, I have already mentioned.
Satish, Ayesha is there, our infection disease expert.
Okay,
so
okay.
directing
Yes,
a few
sir.
questions to her.
Yes,
You can carry on,
yes.
but we would love your comments as well. Yes, please.
Okay. So before the COVID pandemic, for patients who were at high risk, and by that I mean hematological malignancy patients, transplant patients, we used to put them on posaconazole prophylaxis as a mold active prophylaxis for all fungal infections, including Mucor. However, this is a point of debate, and I was just in conversation with ID physicians across the country raising exactly this point, that have we come to the point where we should be considering giving posaconazole as prophylaxis in a high-risk COVID patient? Unfortunately, there isn't any consensus yet on this. There are very few centers where the burden of mucormycosis is extremely high, where they have started giving it. I know of one such center in Ahmedabad. We haven't done it yet at our place in Hinduja Hospital. And that is predominantly because we have not seen a single case treated at Hinduja Hospital who has gone on to develop mucor. All the cases that we are seeing are coming into us as tertiary referrals.
And any thoughts on why they seem to be coming from one particular area, one city? We have so many cases coming from Jalgaon, for example. So what could be the possible cause?
So we've sort of, discussed various possibilities. One, of course, that there may be particularly poor practice in terms of steroid misuse. The second being that we have even considered that there may be some kind of contamination of oxygen supplies, some kind of contamination of humidifiers or, nebulizers or anything that is being used in the COVID treatment. One such center actually even did a study and tried to culture the oxygen, put it onto a petri dish and see what was growing. And there were all sorts of things that were coming out of it. But really nothing concrete, nothing that is, and nothing that can be applied across the board.
Okay.
Again,
you bubble
having
you bubble the oxygen through water. Would you recommend that instead of using simple tap water, they should have sterile water or distilled water? Or is there somebody was talking about putting methylene blue? Any role for that?
I have no idea
Humidifiers.
Sorry, I have no idea about methylene blue. But yes, we
Fine.
don't use tap water in our humidifiers.
So if you were to, the question
Yeah,
from
Dr.
Dr.
Aisha,
Mehta,
what according
guidelines would you tell people to have to prevent this from happening? What would you tell people when you are treating these patients? What measures would you take to prevent?
I think given that we have seen mucormycosis developing even in patients with
What is-
mild COVID, in fact, predominantly with mild to moderate COVID. The severe COVIDs who are in ICU, who are on a ventilator, have a propensity to develop COVID-associated pulmonary aspergillosis. But the ones who are coming to us with the, COVID-associated mucor, again, I say are mild to moderate COVID. Most of them have received a very small sort of duration of oxygenation. Some have not received any oxygen at all, but practically each and every one of them has received an unusually high and prolonged course of steroids. And I think that is something that we really need to wake up to, that we're taking this recovery trials, result way beyond what the interpretation of it is. And even if we are using steroids, we need to control the dose and duration. B, there has to be glycemic control. A lot of these patients didn't know they were diabetic and their sugars were never checked during hospitalization and even after. So I think those would be the two most important things. Then we could start looking at oxygen supplies and other things.
Okay, Satish, while we are questioning, you've been going at a rapid speed. So tell us what you've done so far.
Yeah, see, I've done nothing, just remove the medial and a part of the entry wall of the maxilla to enter head on into the maxillary sinus, you can see. You can see the maxillary sinus.
Very
Some
clearly.
polypoid tissue I have removed. I have not done anything to the disease so far. This is all done for the access so far. And I will tell you the reason why I am doing this for the access. Because our disease focus is behind. And this access is important not only for the intraoperative removal under vision, but for my post-operative surveillance that is equally important.
What do you do to the nasolacrimal duct when you're doing it from medial wall to anterior wall? How do you?
Dr.
Yeah,
Satish.
same like we always do in the dankers. I will cut it sharp at the level of the orbital floor.
Okay.
I will see this is the
Yeah, you can see
nasolacrimal
that.
duct, you can
Yeah.
see.
Yes,
And
very clearly.
I will cut it sharp drill so that it doesn't lead to epiphora later on. So the best is not to cut this hanging nasolacrimal duct in the middle of the course. Otherwise, it may get into fibrosis later on. Don't allow it to hang in future. So first of all, drill close to the floor of the orbit. And then cut it flush to the floor of the orbit. So it doesn't hang anymore down in the cavity. That is very, very important to prevent epiphora later on.
Dr. Satish?
Yes.
Yeah, so Dr. Namrata Sharma has to leave early. Can we just take her comments before she leaves?
Yes, yes, madam, please.
Dr. Namrata, please.
Hello, madam.
Perfect.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah, so by the time she comes online, I have a question for Dr. Aisha.
Aisha?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. How long do you recommend amphotericin B, and how does one monitor the nephrotoxicity part?
Okay. So generally we start liposomal amphotericin B, all right? That is the current recommendation. Deoxycholate has, I understand that in resource limited settings we have to go to it, but liposomal is the way to go in terms of guidance, in terms of international guidance and all the best results and everything. So we don't start with an escalating dose ever. We start directly at 5 milligrams per kilogram for patients who don't have intracranial involvement, and for those who do have intracranial involvement, we start at 10 milligrams per kilogram. All right. We would do creatinine and an electrolyte along with a magnesium on a daily or a 48-hourly basis. And on days when we actually find that the creat is going up, of course, potassium correction goes on regardless. But if we find that creat is sort of jumping up, then we give drug holidays in between. If we find a patient is particularly intolerant and we are not able to keep the creatinine under control, we actually start something like posaconazole by and by to bridge the therapy, because we understand that this patient is not going to tolerate amphotericin B for as long as we'd like to give it. What is the total duration of amphotericin B? I would say at least 14 days at a minimum, and longer in patients in whom debridement has been incomplete for whatever reason, disease is disseminated, patient has ongoing risk factors which cannot be controlled, and patients in whom there is progressive illness in terms of what you see on repeat scans and things like that. So in those patients, yes.
So
Sorry, somebody
Aisha, just hold on for a few minutes. Dr. Namrata Sharma is there with us. She is the General Secretary of All India Ophthalmic Society. Madam would like to offer her views regarding this. Please, madam.
I think I would like to congratulate AIOA Pune and Mumbai both for such an excellent session. Dr. Satish for giving a brilliant lecture and excellent surgery. And we also learned so much, being ophthalmologists. And I also would like to thank Dr. Harshul Tak for, for making us aware about this and for sending messages to 21,000 ophthalmologists who are our members. And I would like to propose, with the help of Dr. Harshul Tak and Dr. Satish and Arpit and the AIOA Pune and Mumbai, to have a joint session with the All India Ophthalmological Society on mucormycosis, which has become so important in today's scenario.
Yes, madam, for sure. These are important questions. What are your indications for orbital exenterations?
So I think Dr. Murthy is a better person to answer, and Dr. Mukesh Sharma is here, he's the secretary of the Oculoplasty Association of India. Dr. Mukesh, are you there? Yeah. So Dr. Mukesh, can you take that question, please?
Yeah. First of all, good evening, everyone. And I must compliment here all the organizers and also Dr. Satish Jain for wonderful.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Yeah. So wonderful surgery, Satish. Keep
Thank
doing
you.
good work in such a difficult time. And I think we must compliment Satish for doing a dual thing in this scenario where everyone is avoiding these COVID patients. He is taking on these cases. This is really great. He is serving humanity, I must say.
And see, now I am reaching the disease now. So far was my exposure. See, now I have a head-on exposure to the area of interest. This is the turbinate which is affected. This is a part of the maxilla. See this? All affected by the mucor. Can you see all this necrotic bone and
Yes, very
tissue?
clearly seen. Satish, very
So
clearly.
in order to reach there, not only reach, but for the future surveillance, this kind of access is tremendously important. If I go without dankers with a narrow access, I will end up compromising my surgical work, and the post-operative follow-up will be equally difficult. See this? Now everything to me is head-on. Now, before I go ahead, let me introduce Dr. Mukesh Sharma, sir. He's a pride of our Jaipur. He's a India fame oculoplastic surgeon, and we are pleased to have him today with us. Thank you, sir, for coming with us.
Yeah. So the question was that what are other indications, ophthalmic indications for exenteration? So the main indication for ophthalmologist is the malignancy. We do exenteration in intraocular tumors which has gone beyond the eyeball, like tumors with extraocular extension, and also for adnexal or adnexal tumors which cannot be localized and which cannot be locally resected. So these are few of the indications. By and large, we are doing exenteration less and less with the advent of good chemotherapy, localized radiotherapy, and good resection. And the other, of course, important indication which we are seeing right now is the mucormycosis. So we do get cases of mucormycosis where we need to do exenteration in conjunction with the you people. Primary surgery is done by the otolaryngologist mainly, and we do exenteration. Along in few of the cases, we give local amphotericin B also, but that is not.
Sir, most of the time, we are able to clear the orbital involvement endoscopically. We call it orbital clearance.
Correct.
Rather than using this terminology of exenteration, which is required in very few number of cases.
Very few cases. Correct. Correct.
Now, this is the turbinate which is affected, which is, necrose because of the vascularity. And we have come to this level only after this exposure. Here's a slight DNS as well, which is limiting our access. Now, what I'm going to do is, I am going to remove this turbinate. See, this is already necrose.
Yes.
See, this is all full of mucor.
Kirtane sir?
Yeah.
Any more questions for Aisha? Otherwise, she has a next meeting lined up.
Yeah. One question for Aisha. Your views on local application of amphotericin and local injection, intralesional injection of amphotericin. And somebody just mentioned about a gel that is available. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and also
sorry.
Yeah, and also role of inhaled nebulized amphotericin B in prevention.
In prevention.
Yes.
Yeah. So we
There's a
have
question
used.
here.
Yeah. We have used again. We've used inhaled amphotericin B for prevention in other risk groups like hematological malignancy patients and those who we cannot give IV amphotericin B to. We have done it in the past. Again, I'll stress that we haven't yet come to the point when we have universally considered prophylaxis for mucormycosis in all institutes for COVID patients. So I don't have any experience in the COVID population with inhaled amphotericin B.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Satish, we can hear you.
See this, the sphenopalatine artery.
Yeah.
See, this tissue is completely gone.
Almost. Yeah.
This is all affected. And here is the role of endoscopic surgery, where you can do everything under vision. What need to be removed, what need to be spared. Absolutely under vision. So that you don't ultimately at the end of the surgery leave any necrotic tissue behind, because if you leave the necrotic areas, your drug will not penetrate. See, this is the pterygoid bone, which is commonly affected. This is the pterygoid bone. I will show you how it is affected, like you see in the JNAs, angiofibromas.
Yes.
The commonest side of so-called recurrence, so-called residual disease is the pterygoid. And here I will show you. I showed you on the scan. I told you before how the pterygoids are harboring this mucor, which is easily overlooked. Let me open this pterygoid and show you something interesting.
So there is a question from Dr. Neha from Dombivli.
See this.
Do you do pterygopalatine fossa clearance in all cases?
Yes, see this. This is all bad bone. This is the simplest of all cases to begin with.
Yeah.
We'll show you the extensive osteomyelitis in the rest of the cases today involving the skull base. But here, see whatever I am able to do right now is simply because of my axis. See my head on axis.
Yes.
Everything I can see, this would not have been possible without Denker. So a lot of people can raise question, why unnecessarily Denkers? Denker is not to, remove any tumor or anything, but to give you a perfect access, 40 there, so that you don't miss any area which need to be removed, and for future you can keep an eye for the surveillance and for the topical application of the drugs.
Dr. Satish?
Yeah?
Dr. Sujata from Mumbai.
Yes, madam.
Would you consider removing the middle turbinate right at the outset or maybe later on? Because once we remove the turbinate, you tend to get a little bit disoriented between the medial and the lateral part. And we know going medial to the turbinate would jeopardize the cribriform plate.
Yeah, that can happen, madam, if you go up. Fortunately, I mentioned earlier, this disease has a preferential involvement of certain areas, and the roof of the nasal cavity, the ethmoidal roof, is unlikely to be involved in the early course of the disease or in most of the cases. So we don't have to go high up to the roof of the ethmoid to damage anything there, to give a CSF leak or anything, unless the disease, involve that area. We have seen a couple of cases involving the ethmoidal roof and going to the frontal lobe of the brain. You have seen, but very, very unlikely. So what I'm doing, I'm using the 0 degree and working in the inferior part of the ethmoid only.
All right.
Dr. Satish, have you come across cases of only palatine involvement? Only palate involvement? Have you come across cases with purely palate involvement?
Purely palate?
Yeah, just
many cases.
blackening on the palate and
many patients will show today as well.
Mm-hmm.
Today also I'll show you the case where the palate is affected and need to be debrided.
Yes.
So palate is, I would say, commonly affected.
No, purely palate. I mean, we recently had cases where only the floor of the nostrils
palate
were
is
involved,
preferentially affected.
Yeah.
The area you have to be careful is the pterygoids, the base of the sphenoid bone, which is most important.
So there's a question for Dr. Aisha. Yeah. Aisha, is you there? Aisha?
Yes, I'm here.
One is the question regarding what is the role of new kid on the block isovuconazole and other antifungals like capsofungin, especially in mucormycosis.
Okay, so I'll start with isavuconazole. Isavuconazole is the latest azole antifungal on the block, which has been found in very small studies. The study is called the VITAL study, to be effective for mucormycosis. However, the guideline published, the international guideline published in 2019, which was a world involved people from all across the world, including Dr. Arunalok Chakrabarty from PGI Chandigarh and Dr. Rajiv Soman, who was with us at Hinduja and my mentor. The current recommendation is for liposomal amphotericin B upfront, isavuconazole for salvage in cases where patients cannot tolerate amphotericin B or it cannot be used for some reason, or as a step down. So that's the position of isavuconazole at the moment. Again, I say very small studies showing efficacy, but in vitro data which is encouraging. Apart from yes.
Madam, just adding on to your point, what you're saying, we have used isovuconazole, Cresemba in a couple of cases, who was severely renal compromised.
Right.
Because isovuconazole can be safely given to the kidney patients.
Absolutely. Yeah.
those patients having creatinine, we had patient having creatinine about 9, and we use isobuconazole in that. We know the efficacy is not as compared to the amphotericin, but relatively good, but it is very, very safe for the kidney. The only limiting factor is the cost.
Yeah, very
Cost
expensive.
of isobuconazole per day therapy is almost say 90,000 per day for 2 days, first 2 days, and then 30,000 a day for the rest of the time.
Right.
Cost
But
is
if
a
you-
limiting factor.
Right. If you were to compare it to LAMB, which is liposomal, and if you were to give a full 5 to 10 milligrams per kilogram,
Yeah.
even with all the best
Okay.
price and everything, you're still spending somewhere between 20 to 50,000 rupees a day,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Isavuconazole tablet. So what the recommendation is to start with the loading dose of IV. So yes, those 2 days are horribly expensive, but the tablet that follows later with the pharma rates and everything comes to approximately 7 to 8,000 rupees a day when you give it at 200 milligrams once a day. And Pfizer has come out with a recent program. You can get in touch with your Pfizer representative where they're going to give 1 strip free for every 2 strips or something like that. But that'll help the patients to some extent. It brings the cost down to between 4 and 5,000 rupees a day.
Aisha?
that's-
Are you
Aisha, that
watching?
still remains the
Sir,
question. Yeah.
Are you watching where I am now?
Yes, you're removing the posterior wall, you're opening the pterygopalatine
I
fossa.
am in the pterygopalatine fossa
Yeah,
to show you
opening it.
something.
Yeah.
See, the bone or the posterior wall of the maxilla was looking good.
Yeah.
Could you see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bone was looking quite good.
Yeah.
And see what is there behind.
Yes.
Yeah,
How
so
could we
necrotic.
make out? By means of MRI.
MRI. Okay.
See this?
Yes.
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 All necrotic in the box of bone. Seemingly normal from outside. Can you see all this?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
See the vessel sphenopalatine.
Yes.
Looking like thrombosed. Can you see?
Yes.
And see all this dead tissue. All this is mucor. This is all dead tissue. If we don't remove this, this is as good as useless gallbladder.
Yeah,
See that?
Satish, I think just a minute. Ayesha has to leave. So Ayesha, one question from Dr. Garima and one from Dr. Neha. Garima wants to know the amphotericin ointment pack. And Neha is asking whether intraorbitally injections of amphotericin will help. So your opinion on that?
Again, we have very little experience with intraorbital injections. We haven't used it significantly in the past. But I must just raise one word of caution that when we have had problems with introducing secondary bacterial infections. So that is something that we need to take a lot of care when we're doing. But yes, I believe a lot of people have started doing it, especially when they're trying to conserve the eye and sort of prevent or defer accentration. But genuinely, not much experience with it at our center.
See now
you.
this key area. This is the key area which is often overlooked. The involvement of the pterygoid bone behind.
Yeah.
See, I am in the infratemporal fossa here now laterally.
Yeah.
This is my maxillary artery in the middle of my field.
Yeah.
And this is what, see all this necrotic,
Yeah.
completely necrotic tissue. This has no penetrance of any drug. If we don't leave this, we are back to square. See this?
Yeah.
This bone is quite often involved and very easily overlooked by the surgeons. It looks like everything is normal. You have removed the dead tissue, terminate and all, and you can happily come out and the disease goes on. See the role of, can you appreciate the role of Denkers now?
Absolutely.
Yes. Your
Very
head
well.
on to straight
This
on to
would
it, yeah.
never have been possible without that. This kind of access for the instrumentation, access for the assessment is so important. See
Satish,
this?
if you can point out where you would expect the maxillary nerve to be in this.
Which nerve?
The foramen
Maxillary
rotundum.
nerve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will, sir.
Satish,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
you have to emphasize it more, because I have seen so many people who are saying mucor surgery is something where whenever bleeding starts, you have to stop. Then after that, everything is taken care. But what you have shown right now, the fungus behind that pterygoid, normal,
Yeah,
healthy.
this bone was
I think you have to-
absolutely, see, this bone was absolutely normal looking.
So you have to emphasize this again and again. It's very important point to avoid.
I could get this only from MRI, that the bone behind the maxilla is not enhancing. That's why I opened this bony window, seemingly normal bone, gallbladder.
Right.
Went behind and found this mucormycosis there. And this can be so easily overlooked. You can imagine.
Very right. And that
If we
itself
leave
is
this
not-
behind, there is no fun in operating.
Yeah, and that can be the
And then
pathway
keep
spread
on
to the
giving,
intracranials.
keep on giving amphotericin for months. See this?
Yeah, we can see
Now
the
what I can
arteries
see,
over
the pterygoid muscles laterally, normal muscles. Can you see?
Yeah, very well.
Very clear.
That I can leave now. Okay, lateral part.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
medially, I have a lot of work to do. This is the simplest situation, I tell you, of the mucormycosis surgery. Now, clip. Now, at this point, at the lateral end, I will prophylactically clip this vessel. Because now I don't need to go further lateral. Can you see?
Yeah, very well.
And I can easily clip with my Karl Storz clips. That's it. Come later. And I have a now, once I get this from my field away, I'll have full access to the pterygoid bone behind. This pterygoid bone is a part of sphenoid bone. In today's presentation, in all these cases, you will see the different involvement of the sphenoid bone at different levels. Maxilla and sphenoid are the two bones most frequently involved. And we all know sphenoid is the most complex bone with various parts. And we'll show you how this bone is affected by this mucor so extensively. See this? You were asking about the nerve. Can you see the nerve?
Yes, very
Very
clear.
well, very well.
That is the normal looking pterygoid process behind. Can you see?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And this is all my diseased tissue. See this all, necrotic.
Yes.
If I don't remove it, better not to operate. Nothing is going to work.
Inferomedially, can you show us the Vedian canal as well?
Yes, yes. Exactly, sir. Can you see?
Yeah,
Yes.
very well. Excellent.
This is the minimal involvement of the pterygoid. But this necrotic tissue need to be removed. And see how important is the cobblator in this setting. Cobblator, debrider and drill. See, all this is necrotic. The key to this successful surgery is the access. I am repeating again and again.
Yeah.
If we do try to do this without dankers in the keyhole, one can never do a satisfactory work. See this all necrotic. See this completely devitalized tissue.
Yes.
See this?
Yeah.
Debrider. So once it comes to surgery, it is a complete surgical work which is most important, because your medical treatment and the overall outcome totally depends upon the surgical work, how much you are debrided. And once you're completely debrided, you'll feel like that you have won over the situation. You don't need to give amphotericin too much, and practically it is not required in most of the cases. I'll show you at the end of the surgery. And we can see post-operatively, we can follow in our OPD with a 0-degree telescope so well. That is not possible with a keyhole surgery. I will show you the revision case after 1 or 2 cases. See this. This is the median canal.
Yes.
This patient had already paresthesia of the face. See this now, which is, see, this is swollen now.
Yeah.
Inflamed now, which was already involved. No point in leaving behind any disease thing. See the clearance now from the infratemporal side. This is infratemporal side.
Yes.
Absolutely healthy. This is the pterygoid. Now I will come to the floor of the sphenoid to make sure that nothing is left behind. Give me the chisel and hammer to the floor of the sphenoid.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satish. That was truly very detailed and very insightful description about the surgery. I hope our viewers are taking away a lot of insights. And to all our viewers, thank you so much for being a part of the program. We will be back again next week with a fresh episode talking about another latest surgical procedure. Till then, please feel free to drop your questions with us and we will get back to you with answers. Stay safe, stay connected. Happy doctor.